Yo, Atlas speaking and welcome to part 3 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as a civilian stuck in a time loop with the gamer system. Let the tale begin. Chapter 41, Kazuo had to wait for another 20 minutes before he felt the very ground shaking. Hundreds of ninjas were about to come into this very clearing, their eyes blazing with fury and hatred as they would look at the other party. The greatest motivator of humankind, hatred. Kazuo thought to himself before showing a light smirk on his face. I wonder how many people will curse me to death by the end of today. Kazuo wondered to himself. 2 explosions rocked the ground, shaking even Kazuo, who was 20 meters underground. The signal, Kazuo thought as he looked at the white paper string in his hand. Before he had left, Kazuo had told Shikaru to cause 2 large explosions above a specific spot in the clearing where he would be hiding as a signal for Kazuo to launch the explosives. Looking at the paper for a moment longer, Kazuo felt slight doubt appear on his face before it was quickly squashed by his mind. They would have done worse if they could. Kazuo thought before channeling his chakra into his hand and into the paper string. It traveled at immense speeds, though it had lost the majority of its energy. The explosion tags thankfully only needed a sliver of chakra to activate, as they were made from extremely chakra-sensitive seals. For a moment, Kazuo thought he had failed as nothing happened. And in the next second, Kazuo finally felt it. The very earth shook as if a nuke had been dropped, causing Kazuo to smash onto the earth around him as if he were a ping-pong ball for a few seconds. After that, the rocking of the earth stopped and silence overtook the place once more. Quickly Kazuo made a hand seal, and using the hiding like a mole technique, he brought himself above ground. Looking around, Kazuo quickly spotted Shikaru, who was looking at him with a certain glint in his eyes. No, it wasn't just Shikaru, it was the entire Leaf Camp. Turning to face the other direction, where the explosions had taken off, Kazuo couldn't see anything because of the dust that had covered the entire clearing. Thankfully, Aoki Hyuga came forward, and after making 4 seals quickly, he inhaled a large amount of air and then blew it out, completely clearing the dust on the battlefield. Wind style, great breakthrough jutsu, Kazuo thought as he quickly analyzed what the man had used. A wind jutsu is said to have the potential of being an S-rank jutsu if the user has enough chakra to supply it. Kazuo thought before quickly turning his gaze back onto the enemy lines. At that moment, Kazuo finally understood the expressions of his Leaf comrades. His own eyes grew wider and his mouth hung slightly ajar. There was nothing left, no enemy. They were gone, and in their spots, only charred remains of limbs, organs, and blood remained. Gulp! Am I actually strong? Kazuo thought to himself jokingly for a moment before turning to look at Shikaru. The man didn't smile at him, still holding that strange look on his face. The rest of the shinobi seemed to come to their minds once more as they quickly roared in triumph. Hundreds of curse words spouted out of their minds as they looked at the dead Cloud Ninja. Tens of the shinobi even rushed to Kazuo and started giving him words of encouragement and pats on the back. Kazuo, however, still felt a bad premonition. Something isn't right. Kazuo thought before shaking his head a moment later. They are dead. The thing is that this big of a loss won't be accepted easily. Kazuo thought as he gazed at the enemy side of the battlefield. His eyes focused as he observed everything. At that moment, he saw it. Lightning flashed from far in the distance. The lightning looked as if it had a mind of its own as it flew through the air. It's coming toward us. Kazuo thought as his mind immediately started thinking of possibilities, and thankfully he found the answer quickly. The answer he had gleaned, however, was grim. The lightning jutsu that the cloud uses to transport supplies over long distances, what if it can be used to carry a person? Kazuo thought as his body started shivering. Quickly his head turned toward Shikaru. Run! Kazuo screamed as he immediately used the body flicker jutsu and disappeared from his location. There was no time to think about dealing with that guy. With their strength, it was like a bug trying to kill a human. It was possible, however, you needed thousands of bugs to sacrifice themselves, and they clearly didn't have thousands of shinobi on their side. As Kazuo thought of this, using his jutsu to get further and further away, he saw the world tilt. The ground and sky switching places. Jinjutsu? Kazuo thought before realizing it wasn't merely a moment later. A large burly man with dark skin and a tattoo on his right shoulder was next to a headless body. "It's me," Kazuo realized as his head fell on the floor and rolled for a few moments. Silence had overtaken the clearing whilst the dark-skinned man turned to face the Leaf Ninjas. Gulp! Tens of gulps were heard, as the eyes of the shinobi shook whilst looking at the man. Finally, he opened his mouth and said with a deep gruff voice that sounded so furious, they felt like he would spontaneously erupt into lightning. "That bastard kid actually killed hundreds of my shinobi, you fucking tree huggers always spawning geniuses as if they are grass found on the roadside," the man said before disappearing from the shinobi's eyes. A moment later, screams erupted all around the clearing. Releasing deep harsh breaths, Kazuo found himself back at the tree with a paper string inside his palm. "I fucking jinxed it, didn't I?" Kazuo thought as annoyance coursed through his mind. "Just you wait, it'll fucking make your life hell," Kazuo thought to himself as he remembered the cocky furious look on the Raikage's face. Chapter 42, Making His Life a Hell Aside, How the Hell Do I Survive This Shit? Kazuo thought as his mind whirred into action. "I don't have the three-pronged kunai for Minato anymore, so I can't summon him to the battlefield like some Pokemon. I'll need to figure something out," Kazuo thought before releasing a long-winded sigh. "Let's just gather more information first. I'll stay underground for longer this time. If I stay under 10 meters underground, then even the Raikage won't be able to pinpoint and kill me that easily, if at all," Kazuo thought as he waited for the right time once more. Just like in the previous turn, Kazuo headed underground and after getting the signal some time later, exploded the explosion tags. This time, however, Kazuo didn't rush to head above ground and only started heading to the backlands of the Leaf forces without actually going above ground. He had already mapped out the location and knew how long he needed to head to arrive at his destination. With him being underground, he couldn't really discern where he was. However, he had calculated the speed that he traveled whilst using the hiding like a mole technique and then calculated how many seconds it would take him to arrive at a specific location. This was the method he had used to plant the explosion tags as well. Counting only the distance wouldn't have worked considering Kazuo couldn't see whilst underground. However, he could predict the amount of time it would take him to arrive at destinations he had previously scouted out. Arriving at the back of the Leaf Shinobi forces, Kazuo stood still as he awaited the arrival of the Raikage. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. After 47 seconds, Kazuo finally felt it. The very earth shook as explosions started rocking the ground above him. An intense battle was being fought whilst he hid underground. Above ground, Shikaru Nara was looking at the menacing figure of the fourth Raikage, a grim expression on his face. "At this rate, we will face complete annihilation. We need to quickly get Minato here. Do you have it?" Shikaru asked as he looked at the umbu on his left. "Yes, sir," the umbu quickly responded as he took a kunai from his bag. It was a three-pronged kunai with a seal inscribed on its handle. Shikaru nodded as he injected a faint amount of chakra into the seal and threw it into the ground. Nothing happened, however. "We have to hold out until Minato arrives. It will take at most 5 minutes, Shikaru said toward the umbu and captains around him. 5 minutes? I don't think we can handle that, Commander, the civilian captain said as his mouth twitched. Sigh. Releasing a shallow sigh, Shikaru closed his eyes for a moment before snapping them open a moment later. A glint appeared in his eyes as his mind started thinking at incredible speeds. The only way is to deter him with suicidal attacks, Shikaru said before turning his head toward a small group of ninjas who had yet to rush toward the Raikage. All of the ninjas in the specific group Shikaru was looking at had poker faces on and no discernible emotions showing. It's your time, use anything, your life included, to stop and slow him down for at least 5 minutes, Shikaru commanded, his voice stern as he looked at the shinobi who turned to face him and nodded their head. No emotions showed even after Shikaru had practically signed their death certificate. The rude huh? Aoki mumbled as he looked at the shinobi rushing toward the Raikage and falling one after the other. Where's the kid? The Inuzuka woman asked as she looked around, however she couldn't catch sight of him. Hearing her question, Aoki quickly made a single hand seal and the veins around his eyes bulged. His pupilless white eyes seemed to gain a small fractured ring in the middle that somewhat resembled a pupil. Looking around, the man quickly nodded toward the ground. He's underground. He must have already sensed the Raikage and chosen to stay hidden instead. It's a smart move considering that the Raikage would undoubtedly have chased after him first. Aoki answered once more before closing his Byakugan. So the little kid is a coward, eh? Inuzuka said, though her tone clearly displayed that it was merely a joke on her side. He's already finished his part of the mission, the rest is left to us. The civilian ninja said in response to her words. He had felt the need to protect Kazuo's reputation even in these circumstances. Kazuo was after all a genius civilian ninja who could help the civilian council later on. Even if he died, Kazuo couldn't fall down in this battle. Hearing his words, Shikaru turned his sight to the man for a slight second before releasing a light hum. Sadly, Lord Danzo already has his sights on him. He won't survive this war even if he does survive this battle. With those thoughts, Shikaru turned his gaze toward the ongoing battle once more. The Raikage was plowing through the shinobi of the leaf as if they were merely wheat and potatoes whilst he was the farmer. It's time for us to join the battle as well, Aoki said before activating his Byakugan once more and using Shunshin to head closer to the lightning monster. 1 minute left, Shikaru thought as he watched the rest of the captains follow Aoki. He however made no move. That kid really resembles me sometimes, Shikaru thought as a light smile appeared in his expression. The smile however was shallow and clearly showed the amount of stress that Shikaru had at the moment. The fighting still hasn't stopped. If it doesn't for another 3 minutes then I'll have to leave, otherwise I risk using all my chakra. Kazuo thought as he closed his eyes and focused on his hearing only, trying to discern the situation above ground, though his efforts proved futile. Chapter 43 Explosions continued to shake the entire ground as Kazuo lay hidden underground. He counted every second in his mind. He needed to be precise, otherwise any mistake could lead him into an even worse situation. After counting to 70 seconds, the ground finally stopped shaking. Either everyone is dead or Minato has arrived. I don't see any other solution as to how the battle ended. Kazuo thought. He had tried to think of countless ways that the leaf could win the battle, however he had only come up with one. Shikaru had taken the 3-pronged kunai that he had dropped and used it to summon Minato. Sigh. Worst comes to worst, I'll just die and go back to the start of the loop. Kazuo thought before slowly heading above ground. As his head and then torso appeared above the ground, Kazuo quickly looked around. Hundreds of corpses were scattered, most of them entirely missing the upper part of their bodies, as if they had been punched by an immense force. The Raikage really is fucking strong. Kazuo thought as he quickly caught sight of the man. The Raikage was around 100 meters away from Kazuo, with a large muscly build and a lightning aura around him. His blonde hair had gone up in spikes and he had a furious expression on his face. Before him stood a single man with bright yellow hair wearing a Jonin flak and blue ninja pants. So you have arrived, Minato Namikaze. Kazuo thought as he looked at the legendary ninjas staring at each other. At that moment the Raikage's eyes turned toward Kazuo, who had just fully emerged from the ground. So it was you, kid? The man said, his voice being clearly heard, likely enhanced by his chakra. Me? No, am just a chunin, sir, how could I? Kazuo asked with a light smile. He hadn't used chakra to reinforce his voice, however the Raikage still heard him. You fucking leaf ninja, always spawning geniuses as if they're mushrooms. The Raikage said before disappearing from Kazuo's view. In the next second, Kazuo saw the Raikage once more. He was right in front of him, his fist already heading toward his face. Boom! The punch however landed on the ground rather than on Kazuo. Looking around, Kazuo found himself next to Shikaru. He had been teleported more than 200 meters away from his previous location in an instant. Meanwhile, Minato once more stood before the Raikage. Head back to the village, there's nothing more you can do here, the mission is accomplished, Minato said with a loud voice while starting directly at the Raikage. Shikaru nodded and quickly turned to address the remaining shinobi who had managed to somehow survive the rampage of the 4th Raikage. Follow me, we're leaving here. Shikaru said before quickly using the body flicker jutsu and starting to run in the direction of the land of fire. Kazuo didn't hesitate as he immediately followed the man. Even a slight hesitation in a place like this would lead to his own demise. As Kazuo headed further and further away, arriving at around 400 meters away from the Raikage, he stopped. Turned around and with a large toothy grin on his face he looked directly at the man. "I fucking killed them all, what are you going to do about it, huh? Tell every woman in the cloud that their daddy did it." Kazuo practically screamed to make sure the Raikage heard him clearly. For a moment after, silence engulfed the entire clearing, the only thing being heard was the lightning flashing around the Raikage's body. The surviving leaf ninjas turned to look at Kazuo as if he were some kind of madman. Kazuo, however, only gave one last smile before using the body flicker and disappearing from his location. Behind him, Kazuo heard an enraged roar, however he didn't turn or stop, merely continuing to run away. "With that, every ninja should know that it was me who caused the devastation. This way Shikaru or anyone else won't be able to steal my achievements. This also increases my standing inside the hidden leaf and further cements my standing as a prodigy," Kazuo thought as he ran away. Minutes passed and they soon turned into hours as the ninjas continued running through the forests and clearings along the way. Finally, they were returning to their home, the Hidden Leaf Village, the greatest of all military forces in the elemental nations. Seeing that the danger had mostly passed, the shinobi turned to Kazuo and asked with wide surprised eyes, "You planted the explosives that killed the cloud forces?" One of them asked, his voice clearly tinged with disbelief. Kazuo smiled and answered the man. "I did, it was dangerous, however I wanted nothing more than to take revenge for our fallen comrades. Those cloud bastards got what they deserved," Kazuo said, his voice sounding slightly furious. His words combined with his newly gained charisma and accomplishments seemed to resonate with the entire remaining Leaf forces as their eyes gazed at Kazuo. They didn't utter words of praise. Kazuo had already surpassed what all of them put together had achieved in their battles. He had risen up further in their minds, becoming someone who couldn't be touched, merely idolized. The situation also made it so that jealousy didn't plant its seed, only leaving admiration behind. Shikaru, who witnessed everything, had a slight gleam in his eyes. "Sadly, you won't get to enjoy this for long, Kazuo. The orders of the route must be carried out," Shikaru thought as he ordered the ninjas to camp out at the small clearing they were in for the night. The hundreds of shinobi had dwindled down to a measly force of 70. Quickly the ninja stopped and set up camp using the sealed tents that they had in their scrolls. Unlike before, the guarding unit, which used to consist of only 20 ninjas, turned into 50. They couldn't afford to be ambushed with such a small force. If they did, then they could be facing complete annihilation. Hours passed and soon midnight arrived. Four ninjas rose up from their beds and geared up quickly. Their mission? Don't let the target wake up to see the morning. Chapter 44. In the dead of the night, four ninjas rose up from their beds. Their mission? The elimination of the target before the sun rose up. Quickly getting geared and secretly heading out of their tents, the four ninjas met up. Each was wearing gray shinobi gear and had a blank white mask on their faces. They were the root shinobi, directly under the command of Leaf Advisor Danzo Shimura, an S-rank ninja. "Has the target been confirmed to be asleep?" one of them asked. His voice wasn't heard as the question had been asked using hand signs. One of the three other root ninjas quickly signed a few hand seals, confirming that he had indeed checked up on the target and found that he was asleep deeply. "All right, commence the operation." These were the words one of the root men said using hand seals. The other three quickly nodded, and immediately after the four of them disappeared at the same time, appearing around 100 meters north in front of a small green tent. "The target is inside," one of the ninjas said using hand seals. The other three nodded their heads, confirming that they had seen what the man had tried to convey. They didn't waste any more time before they stealthily headed into the tent. Inside was a kid, his eyes open as he lay down on the ground. He didn't look to be older than 12. This kid really killed more than 200 cloud ninjas? One of the root shinobi wondered as he looked at Kazuo, who was laid onto the ground. "What are you doing? Do it already!" Another shinobi said with hand seals as he looked at his companion. The man who had thought Kazuo looked like a kid quickly focused his gaze and took out a kunai which was dripping with some unknown substance, though considering the act he was about to do, it was most likely poison. Swoosh! With the sound of the air being sliced apart, the ninja swung the kunai toward Kazuo's neck. Thunk! The kunai, however, seemed to hit something hard, causing it to stop. This immediately alerted the shinobi. It wasn't just the hard stop to the swing that had alerted them, the kunai had sliced through Kazuo too easily, as if he wasn't even there. And as if the world wanted to prove their guesses, merely a moment later the Kazuo on the ground vanished as if he was merely an illusion. 5 meters underground, Kazuo was looking up. Seems like they destroyed my clone, as my chakra connection with it was just lost. Sadly, I don't get the information feedback, otherwise I would have learned more about the enemy. If only they attacked slightly later into the night. Kazuo thought as he continued placing explosion tags on top of his head. Right, he had been planting them since he had first found that someone was going to kill him. How had he found out? Those bastards already killed me 6 times, and each time I only have around a minute before dying, and they are so fucking fast that I can't even do anything before I find myself dead. Kazuo thought as a bloodthirsty smile appeared on his face. The attack had happened right after midnight, causing him to only be able to return around 1.5 minutes back in time after each death. The first time he had woken up with a sword impaled in his throat, the second time he had died after 2 minutes of fighting before one of the umbu had sliced his head off. The third to 6th times he had died by one of them using an earth release jutsu and closing the earth around him once he was underground. Before he had come up with a strategy, by leading an illusionary clone up there and ordering it to keep its eyes open, causing a slight delay in the enemy attack which gave him the time needed to head underground and place the explosion tags. I couldn't fuck up the Raikage, but I most certainly can fuck you up. Kazuo thought as he once more used the hiding like a mole technique and headed deeper under the ground, finding the direction to be easier to move in than the others, which would lower the time he needed to get to a safe location and launch the explosive tags. After repeated use, Kazuo had learned that as long as he stood less than around 25 meters away or so, Kazuo could launch the explosion tags. If the distance was wider, then the chances of success would start lowering dramatically with each meter added. Finally, at a safe enough distance from the explosives, Kazuo made a tiger hand seal. Kai! Boom! With a large booming sound, the whole clearing that the Leaf Ninjas had chosen to camp in shook, quickly waking up any of the sleeping shinobi whilst alarming the ones that were awake to quickly start heading to the explosion site. Above Kazuo, his entire tent had vanished from the face of the earth with only a large fire remaining. 2 of the root ninjas had died from the explosion, 1 was severely wounded whilst the last one, which had given the most orders, appeared to be fine. At the last second, when he felt the explosion heading toward him, he made a split-second decision and grabbed the other root ninja and used him as a meat shield, causing the other man to die and for him to survive without any wounds besides some minor burns next to his elbows. Kazuo, who was underground, quickly used his earth release jutsu once more and headed above ground. Looking at the 2 dead corpses and the 2 alive shinobi, a thought flashed in Kazuo's mind quickly. The root has started targeting me fully? Does that mean that Shikaru no longer considers me valuable but rather like an obstacle to him and the root? It could also be because I refused to join them. Kazuo thought quickly as he placed 2 fingers on his wrist guard and summoned a kunai. His ninja bag had been left in the tent as he hadn't had the time to grab it with him the first time the incident had happened. However, this turn he had left it there himself. Inside the bag had been a couple of explosion tags which had helped further enhance the explosion's power once it reached above ground. The root shinobi looked at him for a moment before the still healthy one turned to the severely injured ninja and made 2 hand seals and used a lightning jutsu. A moment later, the man wasn't severely injured anymore. He was dead. The lightning had passed throughout the umbu's body and headed straight toward Kazuo. However, a quick use of body flicker and Kazuo managed to avoid the jutsu. This didn't give any shock to Kazuo, who looked at the scene. In fact, he felt like it was the right Deikaisen on the side of the root ninja. A severely wounded ally wasn't an ally any longer. At that point they had become an enemy trap, a burden which could hold you back at a crucial point and cause your death. Chapter 45, No longer than a few moments later, Kazuo and the Root Ninja were surrounded by 20 or so shinobi, including all of the remaining captains. "What's going on here, Kazuo?" Aoki Hyuga asked as he used body flicker to appear next to Kazuo, the ninja he had decided to support. "I was asleep when I felt a group of people appearing close by with intent to kill. Thankfully that seemed to wake me up. A moment later 4 shinobi wearing blank masks appeared inside the tent and tried to eliminate me. Thankfully I had placed traps inside there or I would have already lost my life," Kazuo quickly explained, his gaze never leaving the Root Ninja. "This guy won't give up this easily. That's not how the Root operates." This thought flashed through both Kazuo's and Aoki's mind at the same time. As if determined to prove both of them right, the ninja quickly used body flicker to close the distance with Kazuo, an Umbu short sword in his hand. "This fucker won't give up even when found out, and if he manages to succeed then they can't get any information from him because of the tongue seal, and Danzo will surely say that they were just spies trying to instill chaos inside the village. He won't face any repercussions, and even then it's better for me to simply forget this ever happened. Currently I'm much too weak to go against someone like him," Kazuo thought. Aoki quickly got in front of Kazuo and made a defensive stance whilst launching a palm strike toward the solar plexus of the Root Shinobi. The palm hit, however, instead of launching the ninja backward, he simply vanished. A clone, Aoki thought immediately as he used his Byakugan to look around, quickly finding the ninja materializing behind Kazuo and swinging his short sword. This didn't cause any distress to Aoki, however, instead a small smile appeared on his face. The short sword passed right through Kazuo, just like his palm strike had passed through the Root Ninja. Instead, an unknown shinobi which had been a few feet behind Kazuo rushed up to the Root Ninja. His chest seemed to increase in size, and so did his mouth. A split second later, a compressed water bullet launched out of his mouth heading toward the Root Ninja at extreme speeds. At this close of a range, it wasn't something that could be avoided by a random root. Bang! The enhanced water bullet hit the shinobi's back, causing him to be launched more than 10 meters away from the impact, and his back to become a complete bloody mess. It was Kazuo. He had used the transformation jutsu to change his appearance. 3 more turns, fucking son of a bitch, Kazuo thought to himself as he looked at the downed ninja. He had died 3 more times whilst trying to find a way to juke the Root Ninja and finally had landed on his current plan. Whilst underground, use another clone jutsu and give it a set command to say what had happened, making it so that even Aoki wouldn't think it was a clone, considering it wasn't possible for the clone to actually possess intelligence. It could only do what the user had commanded it to. This was a way of using the clone jutsu that only someone like Kazuo could accomplish. Then appear a few feet behind the clone whilst maintaining his stealth, and just when the root appears behind his clone to quickly make the hand signs and use the water bullet jutsu. This plan had almost worked during the last turn, however he had misjudged the amount of time that it took him to release the enhanced water bullet, causing his demise a split second later when the root detected him. Why can't I just be fighting Gennin like I should be? Kazuo thought to himself in annoyance, however he still was feeling the rush of excitement from having outsmarted a root Umbu team. Seems like I was concerned for nothing, Aoki said, his stoic face displaying a slight smile as he looked at Kazuo. No, I couldn't have done it without you, sir, Kazuo said, staying humble in front of the man, who seemed to become even more pleased at his words. The Hyuga really have something up their ass. That makes the easiest way to get close to them being giving them shitty praises every time, Kazuo thought as he arrived to stand next to the man. A moment later, Shikaru and the Inuzuka captain appeared at the same time. Looking at the dead bodies and the destruction at the site, Shikaru's eyes seemed to gleam as his eyebrows slightly furrowed. Damn, this is the second time, isn't it, kiddo? The Inuzuka woman said before laughing out loud. You really are strong. We should spar sometime. Come to my clan grounds when we get back to the Leaf. I'll show you a good time, the woman said, her face becoming the definition of what people would call a predator. Kazuo merely gazed at the woman before giving her a smile and a nod. I'm afraid that I won't have much time, Captain. I'll be asking the Corps to send me back to the battlefield again as soon as they can, Kazuo said, his voice slightly too loud if he simply wanted the woman to hear him. His words caused the smile on the woman's face to widen even more as the emotion in her eyes intensified. I really am starting to like you more and more, you know? Sadly, you're still so young. As if you care about that, control your expression, you fucking mutt. Kazuo thought to himself inwardly. The profanities spewed in his mind had only increased as the stress of multiple deaths in a short interval had. He, however, didn't have a choice but to smother the woman and everyone else with kind words. The higher he stood up, the more people liked him, the more he stood a chance in this village at gaining rewards. Of course, the higher that standing was, the more danger there would be as well. However, danger brought chances and delicious fruits as well. It was only a matter of whether he was capable enough to pick those fruits. A connection with the Hyuga is more beneficial. However, this guy is only a branch member. I'll have to see if he can introduce me to the main branch. If not, then I'll go and pursue a connection with the Inuzuka. Kazuo thought, his gaze never leaving Shikaru's face. Quickly clear these bodies and bring a Yamanaka to see if anything can be found in their brains. If not, then discard their bodies. Since everyone is already up, we will start heading to the leaf once more, Shikaru said as he quickly ordered the ninjas around him. After which he started walking toward his tent once more. As he passed Kazuo, he merely gave him a nod. Kazuo replied with a bright smile. Ah, the joy of ruining your plans, it frankly knows no bounds right now. Chapter 46, as if the Yamanaka will be able to find anything. Kazuo thought, his expression had quickly turned calm, only a light charismatic smile resting on his face. Kazuo headed to the remains of what was once his tent. Looking around, he found nothing of use. The explosion had evaporated anything he had. Thankfully, I keep everything of use in my wrist guards, otherwise I would have incurred quite a loss to my already meager supplies. Kazuo thought, his gaze wandering toward Shikaru. And with how things are going, I'm rather sure that refunding me with what I had wouldn't have happened. Turning around once more, Kazuo headed toward Shikaru this time. It's good that they showed themselves. Wouldn't want the village to be infiltrated, Kazuo said as he looked at the man, his eyes showing a sharp gleam, the atmosphere around the two quickly deteriorating as tension took hold. Shikaru, however, wasn't flustered in the least as he nodded with a grateful smile toward Kazuo. That's right. I'll make sure to tell the Hokage about your accomplishments, Shikaru said, his voice light as he spoke to Kazuo. If I didn't know who they really were, then I might have actually believed you. You Naras really are more frightening than almost any clan out there, Kazuo thought as he nodded his head. Am grateful, Commander, though my time under you is getting cut rather short because of that damned Raikage. I'll forever remember you as my first real master, Kazuo said as he looked deeply into the Nara's eyes. His voice and expression showed gratitude, however his eyes told a completely different story. Do you think I'm afraid of you? No, Shikaru Nara, I am not afraid. I've already died more times than I can count. You and Danzo have chosen to be my enemies. Well then, let's see who the last one standing will be, Kazuo thought before giving Shikaru another nod and turning around, heading toward the supply team tent. He didn't have more than 3 minutes to get some supplies from them before they completely packed up and got ready for the road. Using the body flicker jutsu, Kazuo quickly arrived and asked a man for some simple supplies. Thankfully, the man knew who Kazuo was and gave him the supplies easily. It would be an anomaly if people didn't know about me by now, Kazuo thought to himself as he mingled with the shinobi as they got ready to start their march once more. They only had around 13 hours of traveling left before they would arrive at the Hidden Leaf. This is as good of a time as any, Kazuo thought as he talked with the shinobi who clearly had raised Kazuo up in their minds and hearts. By going around the camp and asking everyone how they were and building at least a shallow relationship with them, Kazuo strived to give another prefix to himself. Humble. Orochimaru failed in the end because he was unapproachable. People couldn't bear to ask someone like him to help them. His standing was as high as a mountain, but he was just that, a lone mountain, Kazuo thought as he saw the last of the shinobi get ready. Finally, less than 5 minutes after Shikaru had given the order, the entire ninja camp was back on the road once more. Or rather the trees as they hopped from one branch to the other. To Kazuo it was a rather funny sight, seeing tens upon tens of people jumping from one tree branch to the other. Like this, hours passed and soon the night gave way to the morning and the afternoon. After 13 hours of traveling, he finally saw the familiar sight once more. The giant gates of the Leaf, with a long row of what appeared to be merchants at the door, getting their identification checked and then slowly passing through the gates and into the large military village. Shikaru didn't waste time as he quickly headed to the front, and in less than a minute, the gates fully opened, letting the entire camp forces inside. Immediately after their entry, the roads cleared up as the villagers lined themselves close to the edges and gave the shinobi way, their eyes filled with emotion as they looked at the bloody group of ninjas. "Mommy, is the war over?" A kid asked what looked to be his mother. The woman didn't answer the kid besides giving him a shallow smile and a rub on the head. At this moment, a shinobi walked close to the kid. It was a young shinobi with chin-length black hair and black eyes, with a soft smile on his face. The young ninja crouched down to the kid's level and ruffled his hair. "Don't worry, even if the war isn't over, we will protect you and your mama, so be strong, kid." His words seemed to encourage the kid as his eyes gleamed in excitement as he gazed at the handsome ninja. "Thank you," the woman said immediately as she gave a bow to Kazuo, who had come to reassure her son. The villagers around them who had heard his words also seemed to get better moods as they looked at the young ninja with pride. Pride that they were part of this village and had ninja like Kazuo to protect them. After a small nod, Kazuo straightened up and headed back to the march of ninjas who were heading to the Hokage Tower. When such a large amount of ninjas came back at the same time, they had to first assemble before the Hokage Tower, where the Hokage would come out and personally give them a speech. A speech so that he can make sure the manipulation is as ingrained into everyone as it can be. Kazuo thought inwardly with distaste, though he held up his smile and kept giving waves to any kid he found on the road looking at them. Kids are the most easily influenced, it's easier to spread my image amongst them, however they also forget faster, so I'll have to keep surpassing expectations and continue to increase my fame if I want the next generation to remember me. Kazuo thought, his smile slightly widening. Soon enough, I just need a few years and then we shall see whose side the village takes, Danzo. Kazuo thought as images of a rebellion flashed through his mind. Chapter 47. Soon enough the entire camp forces arrived before the Hokage building, or rather next to it where a large platform stood. As they all stood in line, thoughts and memories flashing through their heads, a man appeared on top of the platform. He wore a long cloak of sorts with a large hat, the kanji for fire embroidered in it. It was the third Hokage. His face showed a soft expression, however his aura was commanding beyond belief. Kazuo, who stood near the front of the shinobi, had a clear look to it. He had already experienced the aura of the man during a previous turn, however this was the first time that he had seen it in its full glory. It was like he was standing in front of a towering beast, though the aura felt more protective than dangerous. Is he using chakra as a way to increase it? I don't see any other logical explanation. His aura almost feels physical. Kazuo thought as he gazed at the man who would later be called useless by most of the people in his previous world. However, at this moment, he wasn't the professor, he wasn't Naruto's grandfather figure. He was a god amongst shinobi, and he didn't ask for respect, he demanded it. A smile bloomed on Kazuo's face, his entire being was overtaken by sheer excitement. Can I reach that level? No, I must and I will, Kazuo thought to himself. Finally, the god of shinobi arrived at the front of the platform and started his speech. His voice towered over any other sound as he welcomed his shinobi back into the village. Hundreds of villagers had already gathered around, their hearts being ignited by the man. I welcome on this day people who have triumphed over our enemies and have given everything they have for the prosperity and safety of our home. The man started, his gaze seemed to pierce into every shinobi. His next speech was convoluted if Kazuo had to say so. Every word felt like it had been specially crafted to ignite the so-called will of fire into the shinobi and to turn their depression and hatred into fuel that continued the fire that was housed inside the village. As a way to better control and manipulate everyone, so that they followed his orders even in death. Frightening, the amount of charisma required to turn battle-worn shinobi, killers who have fought with death itself and then turn that back into its original state of well-behaved dogs that will do anything for him, for a sense of justice that has been crafted by the village. Kazuo thought, his smile twitching as he continued listening to the man. The speech lasted for 25 minutes before the man nodded, amidst the erupting cheers of the shinobi and villagers alike. And then he disappeared back into the Hokage tower. The villagers mostly dispersed and the tired ninjas soon followed, each heading to their own homes to meet their family and lovers. For them the war wasn't over, however they had won a significant battle. Kazuo followed suit and used the body flicker to head to the apartment at the edge of the village, where his memories told him his home was. Arriving at the apartment, Kazuo found nothing but filthy roads, old buildings that seemed to be on the verge of collapse, and unsightly people hanging around the roads. Seems like the place I was given as a Gennin really isn't all that, huh? Though I already knew from the memories, experiencing it yourself really does put everything into perspective. Kazuo thought with a slight sneer before heading to the door of his apartment, only to realize that his keys had been melted and completely destroyed with his tent. Sigh. Releasing a soft sigh, Kazuo put 2 fingers on his wrist guard, summoning a kunai which he quickly slashed at the lock. Clang. The lock fell down and he gained entry into his home once more. Heading through the door, he saw a single bed with white walls that looked like they had been smeared with shit and some old drawers to the left that had seen much better days. Not only was that bastard lazy in the academy, but he also lived like a fucking pig. Kazuo thought in annoyance, closing the door behind him and walking to the bed. Sitting on the bed, Kazuo put his feet up and lay down fully. I'll rest for a while. We will have around 2 weeks of vacation before we get sent to the next battlefield. I expected less, but it seems like the war is coming to a quick close. Kazuo thought as he gazed at the ceiling. At that moment a loud sound was heard and the bed under him crashed to the floor. A twitching smile was the only change in Kazuo's expression. He hadn't even moved when the bed had collapsed from under him. Ah, why is the war camp starting to look like a good place all of a sudden? Kazuo thought before quickly jumping out of the bed and heading to the door. Grabbing a ninja wire, he tied it around the door and then tied the other end to the handle of a kunai he threw a few feet behind him, effectively making a lock. Heading back to the bed, Kazuo lay down once more, this time closing his eyes, hoping that he wouldn't have any nightmares today. His hopes were utterly crushed, however, as he spent his entire time asleep dreaming about his deaths, each one more harrowing than the other. Be it being impaled through the chest, exploding into smithereens, having his head blow up from a jutsu, having his head decapitated, or having his entire upper half slashed through by a root ninja. At the end of each death, he saw a singular non-changing figure. A large black sea, on top of which a small wooden rowboat stood, and the man rowing it was a dark skeleton with a large withered black cloak, the holes in his skull piercing as they gazed at Kazuo. A shrill laughter was the only thing heard before Kazuo dreamed of another painful and harrowing death. Only at the end of the dream did the skeleton finally say something. You will never escape destiny, for it has already ensnared you in its web. Chapter 48, Releasing Harsh Breaths. Kazuo woke up with his back drenched in sweat, the broken bed creaking underneath him. Looking around quickly, he remembered that he was back inside the Leaf Village. Using one hand to clean off the sweat that had covered his forehead, Kazuo got up whilst releasing a sigh. No thoughts passed through his head as he headed to the small kitchen on the left side of the apartment, opened the fridge, and found nothing besides rotten food with so many cockroaches that Kazuo wondered if they had made a nest inside the fridge. Fucking hell, what a great way to start the day. Kazuo thought as he released a long sigh and headed to the door. He had quite a lot to do for these 2 weeks. His plans were to train until he completely mastered water walking, bringing his chakra control to higher levels which would help in maintaining his reserves in combat. He would also be training every other technique at his disposal until they reached the highest degree of mastery. This wouldn't be that hard considering he had the time loop. Most important, however, was the fact that he had to increase his physical stats. To do that he needed a good diet as well as a set of weights that he could wear constantly during the 2 weeks. His physical stats couldn't be trained using the time loop, so they had become a point of weakness to Kazuo. Once outside of the apartment, Kazuo used the body flicker jutsu to quickly arrive at the Hokage tower, inside of which was a special office where ninjas could get their monthly paycheck. With him having become a Chunin, his pay would be much higher than it had been as a Gennin. I'm here to receive my monthly pay, Kazuo said as he stood in front of a wooden oak counter, behind which an old woman stood. "Could I get your ninja ID, please?" the woman asked as she extended her hand, and Kazuo didn't dally at all as he extended the small card toward the woman. Thankfully, he had stored it inside his wrist guards, otherwise he would have had to go through the process of acquiring another one, lowering the time he had to train even further. "Everything checks out. This is your monthly pay as a Chunin," the woman said as she gave him back his ninja ID as well as a small brown bag. Kazuo nodded before putting the ninja ID back in his ninja bag and tying the small brown bag to his waist, after which he headed outside and used the body flicker to directly head toward the shopping district of Konoha. The streets were made of dirt with wooden buildings all around, a complete contrast to the asphalt and concrete that Kazuo was used to back in his old world. Hundreds of villagers passed through the street, creating the image of a bustling and well-off village. The faces and expressions of these people were soft, some even had calm and happy expressions as they went about their day. Standing still, Kazuo looked at them for a moment before releasing a light chuckle and heading toward what looked like a ninja shop, considering the sign on top of it was a kunai and a shuriken. Heading inside, he quickly found that he was quite wrong. The shop was a noodle shop. Turning around, Kazuo tried a few more stores before finding what he was looking for. Once inside, Kazuo found hundreds of different weapons, be it kunai, shuriken, sunbon needles, ninja thread, and even giant fuma shuriken. "Welcome to our small shop. What might I help you with today, kid?" An old man with a large beard that almost went down to his waist said from behind a wooden counter. "I was looking for some training weights. Do you have any?" Kazuo asked as he looked at the man, who nodded his head almost immediately. "We do. I'll bring out the types we have in just a moment," the old man said as he turned around and headed into another room behind the counter, coming back a minute or so later whilst holding 3 items in his hands. Putting them on the counter, he pointed to each item and gave a short description. "We have 3 different types of weights," the old man said before pointing to the one on the far left. "These ones are the cheapest, but they do the job. They have physical weights placed inside of them, so their limit is only at 100 kilograms. The man said before pointing to the next item. "These ones are seal-based weights. They can increase and decrease the weight based on a certain mechanism, though I don't understand clearly how they are made. What I do know is that they can go up to 300 kilograms. The man said before turning his hand to the last item on the counter. "Those look like the seals that Rock Lee used to use," Kazuo thought as he stared at the familiar-looking weights. "These are the best ones we've got. They are also seal-based, however they can go up to 1 ton in weight," the man said before giving Kazuo a price for each item. "I'll take the cheapest ones. Am quite short on money for now, uncle," Kazuo said as he gave the man a smile and pointed to the cheapest non-seal-based weights. "All right, I'll prepare them for you right away," the old man said with a smile as he removed the 2 other seal-based weights, quickly grabbed what looked like a bag, and placed the physical weights inside together with 16 iron rods. "Here, 2 ankle weights and 2 wrist weights. I also placed all the different weight rods inside. They're included for the same price," the man said, and Kazuo quickly handed over the money, took the bag, and headed outside. "This is fucking heavy," Kazuo thought as he used both hands to hold the bag that weighed 100 kilograms. Once outside of the shop, Kazuo quickly used the body flicker. His next destination was a place called Yakiniku-Q, a famous place for barbecue which would be the source of his food for the next 2 weeks. Chapter 49, a restaurant owned by the Akimichi clan. They serve the best meat in the entire village. This will be the main part of my diet for the next 2 weeks, though my reserves of money will most certainly be taking a large blow by the end of the training. As for the other part of the diet, I'll just grab vegetables and fruits from random stalls in the market district of the village," Kazuo thought as he headed inside Yakiniku-Q. "These 2 weeks will be hellish," Kazuo thought to himself as he got seated at a table. Looking around the restaurant, Kazuo found that it wasn't as filled with people as he had thought it would be. Most likely because of the war, the village doesn't have many ninjas stationed inside the village, considering that Konoha is fighting on so many battle fronts. Kazuo thought before a waitress arrived and took his order. A while later, having finished his food, Kazuo headed to the counter, paid for his food, and headed out. The day was still young. he decided that there was no better time to start training than now. Jumping on top of a building, Kazuo used the body flicker to quickly traverse the distance, and in less than 2 minutes, he arrived at the training grounds. Specifically, Training Ground 1, which was the largest training ground in the Hidden Leaf. It was open to everyone, however it was mostly used by the reserve Gennin Corps. Looking around, Kazuo found not more than 6 people using the training ground, an extremely low number considering this body remembered training here with hundreds of others at the same time. The war is at its climax, soon enough the Kanabi Bridge battle will take place. Kazuo thought as he turned his gaze away from the Gennin and used the body flicker to head deep into the training ground. After finding a suitable spot next to a small stream of water, Kazuo stopped. Let's get started right away. Kazuo took out the weights from the bag and put them on before taking one metallic rod and slotting it into each weight strap. One rod is about 25 kilograms. Kazuo thought as he moved his limbs around, the weight was quite uncomfortable and his movements had clearly suffered because of them. I'll have to get used to them and quickly. Kazuo thought before taking off his ninja sandals and stepping onto the stream of water and started performing taijutsu kata whilst maintaining his balance and chakra control on the water. Whilst he did the taijutsu katas, Kazuo opened his status menu. Stats. Name, Kazuo. Age, 12. Race, human. Strength, D. Endurance, D. Agility, D. Intelligence, B. Charisma, B. Chakra, C. Skills. Time Loop, Level 1. Academy Taijutsu, Level 9 out of 10. Academy Shurikenjutsu, Level 9 out of 10. Clone Jutsu, Level 6 out of 10. Substitution Jutsu, Level 5/10. Transformation Jutsu, Level 5/10. Hiding like a mole Jutsu, Level 10 out of 10. Paper Shuriken Jutsu, Level 10/10. Water Style, Enhanced Water Bullet, Level 4 out of 10. Chakra Control, Tree Walking, Level 10 out of 10. Chakra Control, Water Walking, Level 7 out of 10. Summoning, Lighting Flash Blade Creation, Level 10 out of 10. Shunshin, Level 8 out of 10. Maintaining the taijutsu katas whilst water walking and reading his status menu appeared to be beyond Kazuo's current capabilities as his legs got submerged into the stream of water, his water walking failing. I was wondering how to increase the speed of my water walking. This could work. Kazuo thought as a small smirk appeared on his expression. Hopping on top of the water and activating his water walking once more, Kazuo started his training once more. Minutes turned into hours. Hours turned into days, and soon enough it was day 13. Waking up on the broken bed, Kazuo quickly got up and headed to the kitchen, took out a pre-made salad and quickly had his fill before heading out of the apartment. His destination was Training Ground 1. This had been his daily regime for the last 13 days: wake up, get your fill of food, and head to the training ground until noon, after which he would go to Yakiniku and then back to the training grounds until late at night before heading to Yakiniku once more and then going to bed in his small apartment. As he arrived next to the stream he had used for his water walking practice, Kazuo looked around. Trees had been toppled, the earth had deep holes here and there, and even the trees that were still standing had hundreds of holes and slashes on them. Status, Kazuo thought before the screen appeared in front of him once more. Stats. Name, Kazuo. Age, 13. Race, human. Strength, C. Endurance, C. Agility, C. Intelligence, B. Charisma, B. Chakra, C. Skills. Time Loop, Level 1. Academy Taijutsu, Level 10 out of 10. Academy Shurikenjutsu, Level 10 out of 10. Clone Jutsu, Level 8 out of 10. Substitution Jutsu, Level 8/10. Transformation Jutsu, Level 8/10. Hiding like a mole Jutsu, Level 10 out of 10. Paper Shuriken Jutsu, Level 10/10. Water Style, Enhanced Water Bullet, Level 6 out of 10. Chakra Control, Tree Walking, Level 10 out of 10. Chakra Control, water walking, level 10 tenths. Chakra control, chakra thread, level 4 tenths. Summoning, lighting flash blade creation, level 10 out of 10. Shunshin, level 8 out of 10. There's been a lot of progress during the last 2 weeks, especially in my physical stats. However, the mastery of techniques isn't going as quickly as I would like. It seems like inevitably I'll have to resort to using the time loop. Kazuo thought as he released a soft sigh. During these 2 weeks of training, Kazuo had brought his Academy Taijutsu and Shuriken Jutsu to the limit as well as mastered water walking, after which he had devised a new chakra control technique. By using his chakra to form threads and then try to make a rope of sorts with those chakra extensions, the difficulty was in making sure that the threads didn't combine with each other. This had proved to be quite the difficult task, however, and even now Kazuo failed more than he succeeded. Only last night was he able to make the system recognize the chakra thread training. Chapter 50. I've also increased my mastery of all Academy Jutsu. The only thing that I practiced but couldn't get higher was my body flicker, which will take a while to bring to perfect mastery. Kazuo thought before his mind switched to what he had been thinking during the entire 2 weeks. A way to kill myself painlessly. I'll have to see if it actually works, but this should be painless and quick. Kazuo thought. He had thought of using poison, using the water bullet technique wrongly again as well. However, in the end he ended up with his current idea. By sending an exorbitant amount of chakra into his brain forcefully, causing the brain to explode and kill him instantly. Taking a deep breath, Kazuo readied himself mentally and steeled his will. 3, 2. Before he even counted to 0, Kazuo rushed his entire chakra reserves into his head, specifically his brain. The overload happened instantly and... thump! Kazuo fell down face first into the ground. Opening his eyes, Kazuo found himself back inside his apartment. The day had restarted once more and he was back on his broken bed. Inhale. Taking a long deep breath and exhaling it slowly, Kazuo stood up from the bed and walked to the kitchen to prepare his morning meal once more. Let's get this grinding started for real, Kazuo thought as he finished his meal and headed to the training grounds. Time continued to repeat, the same day over and over. Day 13 of the vacation for the 10th time. Day 13 of the vacation for the 25th time. Day 13 of the vacation for the 60th time. Death had become a mundane part of Kazuo's life. When it no longer hurt, when you didn't even notice it, and the only change was that you found yourself back in time. However, that didn't mean that it was easy. Eating the exact same food 112 times in a row. Practicing the same jutsu over and over, but no matter how much he tried, no matter how much he sweated, bled, and cursed, his body remained the same with only a number in a holographic screen going up every once in a while. Finally, however, it was over. 13th day of vacation for the 113th time. Inside Training Ground 1, a young ninja was sitting on the ground, a large toothy grin on his face, his entire body drenched in sweat. I fucking did it, Kazuo thought as he stared at a holographic screen in front of him. Stats. Name, Kazuo. Age, 13. Race, human. Strength, C. Endurance, C. Agility, C. Intelligence, B. Charisma, B. Chakra, C. Skills. Time loop, level 1. Academy Taijutsu, level 10 out of 10. Academy Shuriken Jutsu, level 10 out of 10. Clone Jutsu, level 10 tenths. Substitution Jutsu, level 10 tenths. Transformation Jutsu, level 10 tenths. Hiding like a mole Jutsu, level 10 out of 10. Paper Shuriken Jutsu, level 10 tenths. Water Style, Enhanced Water Bullet, level 9 out of 10. Chakra Control, Tree Walking, level 10 out of 10. Chakra Control, Water Walking, level 10 tenths. Chakra Control, Chakra Thread, level 10 tenths. Summoning, Lighting Flash Blade Creation, level 10 out of 10. Shunshin, level 10 out of 10. Every single jutsu that I know is now perfectly mastered besides the enhanced water bullet. However, from what I've seen, the only way to increase that to max mastery is by gaining water elemental chakra affinity training, which doesn't carry over during the time loop for some reason. Kazuo thought as he stared at the status screen, and with a smile on his face, he got up from the ground, and for the first time in 113 days, he was finally leaving this damn training ground. Once outside, Kazuo decided that there was no better way to end this last day of his vacation than to go for a hearty meal at Yakiniku Q. Without making any hand signs at all, and with no smoke appearing, Kazuo vanished from his spot as he moved at tremendous speeds using the body flicker jutsu. I've mastered the jutsu, however I still can only use it in short bursts to locations that are within my sight. My visual prowess simply isn't good enough to allow me to use it how Shursui managed to. At that point I wouldn't consider his jutsu even the body flicker anymore. Kazuo thought to himself as he arrived in front of the Yakiniku Q restaurant. Heading inside, the waitress greeted him with a smile. By now every worker in the restaurant knew the boy who came back every day to eat at the restaurant. That wasn't the only reason that they knew who Kazuo was, however. 2 weeks had passed and Kazuo's accomplishments on the battlefield had spread to every corner of the village. The handsome young ninja defeated an entire army of enemy shinobi using only his mind and a handful of explosion tags. And that was one of the less far-fetched stories being said around the village. There were some that told about how Kazuo had faced the Raikage one-on-one and managed to get a draw whilst cursing the Raikage's mother at the same time. Just thinking about the crazy stories that were swirling around about him made Kazuo smile. Good, the more extreme the stories get, the more famous I'll become, though the downside is that my bounty will likely get higher and soon enough enemies will start targeting me when I'm on the battlefield. I also can't use the fact that I'm a child to trick them into letting their guard down anymore. Kazuo thought before releasing a shallow sigh. Sitting down on a corner of the restaurant, Kazuo awaited his order. At that moment, however, Kazuo heard a loud voice arguing with someone. Lifting his head, Kazuo saw someone he hadn't been expecting. Team 7, huh? Kazuo thought as he gazed at what could be called one of, if not the most legendary team to have ever existed, coming close to even the Team 7 of the future. Besides Rin, each of these guys becomes a legend in their own right. Minato the 4th Hokage, Kakashi the 6th Hokage, and of course Obito, a man who becomes the Ten-Tails Jinchuriki. Kazuo thought before a large smile appeared on his face. You shouldn't have forgotten about me, right, Minato-senpai? Kazuo thought, his lips curling upward. Chapter 51, You shouldn't have forgotten me, right? Minato Sanapi. Kazuo thought as his lips curled upwards. Team 7 looked around trying to find a table. At that moment Minato's gaze landed on Kazuo, who was looking at him with shining eyes and a soft smile on his lips. Minato felt uncomfortable, however he decided to head closer to the young ninja that idolized him so much. We meet again, Kazuo, right? Minato asked as he smiled at Kazuo. Kakashi, Obito, and Rin, who were behind him, were showing confused looks before Obito made an exclamation as if he had just remembered something. I'm honored that Minato-senpai remembered me. Do you want to join me for some dinner? You guys too? Kazuo said as he showed an expression of joy as if Minato remembering him was one of the greatest things that could have happened to him today. Kakashi made an expression as if he was already bored with this conversation, whilst Obito seemed to nod. Rin remained still, not showing an expression of rejection or acceptance, clearly leaving it to Minato's decision. Minato seemed to think about it for a second or two before he nodded his head. Alright, then we'll join you for dinner tonight. Hope we aren't intruding, Kazuo, Minato said with a light smile. Not at all, senpai. It's a pleasure that I can eat together with a shinobi like you, Kazuo said. His words made Minato's smile twitch, however his students showed different expressions. Obito and Kakashi looked especially proud, as if Kazuo was praising them instead of Minato. The group settled down around the table and soon enough the waitress came to take their order. Kazuo decided to take a second serving of food as a way to congratulate himself for having completed his training. As soon as the waitress went away, Obito turned toward Kazuo and asked, his expression showing that he was extremely curious. So are the rumors that you defeated more than 100 cloud ninjas at the same time by yourself true? Obito asked, his eyes practically shining. His question clearly piqued the interest of the rest of them as they turned toward face Kazuo curiously. Kazuo simply shook his head and gave a light chuckle. I'm afraid that most of the rumors are quite exaggerated. Sure, I did technically eliminate more than 100 cloud ninjas, however it was because of a plan that I and the camp commander came up with, Kazuo said. However, his words, instead of lowering Obito's and the others' curiosity increased it by leaps and bounds. Even Kakashi's eyes sharpened as he looked at Kazuo. What did you do? Minato decided to ask himself. Kazuo turned toward the man and replied, explaining the strategy that he had come up with and then executed on the battlefield. So you used the hiding like a mole technique and planted hundreds of explosion tags under the ground? Your mastery over earth elemental jutsu must be high. Minato replied, his eyes clearly showing that he was thinking of ways he could have countered the strategy. How did you manage to use the hiding like a mole technique and plant the bombs simultaneously? And even then, how did you manage to explode all of the tags at the same time when the distance was that large? Kakashi finally talked for the first time since he had sat down. His gaze clearly showed that he doubted if what Kazuo had said was true. Kazuo gave the young ninja a sidelong glance before nodding and starting his explanation. I have enough mastery over the jutsu where I only need to use a single hand seal to start the jutsu, and after that, I can simply copy and continue the path of chakra movement indefinitely. This makes it so that the jutsu can be maintained even when I'm not holding the hand seal. As for how I managed to launch all of the explosives at the same time, I'm afraid that it's a secret, Kazuo said as he winked at the youngest Jonin of the Leaf. That's impressive. I thought you simply had high levels of earth chakra manipulation, however that comes close to perfect mastery over a jutsu. I'd say that you're quite close to perfect mastery, which should remove that last hand sign for the jutsu as well, Minato said as he nodded his head. Rin simply remained silent as she listened to the group, clearly deciding that she didn't have enough knowledge to add anything to the conversation. She's going to die soon enough either way, Kazuo thought as he gave her a minute glance before completely ignoring her as if she wasn't even part of the group, though he was doing it secretly so that he wouldn't offend the others at the table. The food quickly came and the shinobi started eating, the conversation coming to a close for a while. Your group gets sent back to the battlefield tomorrow if I recall correctly? Minato questioned as he finished eating his meal. Kazuo gulped down the rest of the food still in his mouth and nodded as he patted the edges of his mouth with a white cloth. That's right, Minato-senpai. I'm unsure where I will be sent to, however. I just hope it's not to the battlefield with the mist. My earth style would be suppressed quite heavily when there is no ground underneath our feet, Kazuo said. Kakashi nodded his head, as he added on. Right, earth-style users do have a large disadvantage in that battlefield. It can be even worse than the disadvantage fire users have when fighting a water-style user, simply because the amount of jutsu that requires contact with the earth for earth-style jutsu is quite high. That's right, however, even if I get orders to head to the mist, I won't object. Anything for the greater good of the village, and I'm sure the Hokage knows better than me either way, Kazuo replied with a soft radiant smile. Minato stood silent for a few moments before finally asking Kazuo a question. Would you like to join my team? I won't be able to be with them in the next mission, so they would be a member short, Minato asked as he turned to look at Kakashi, asking with his eyes if the boy had any objections. Kakashi simply nodded his head, showing no objection to the addition of Kazuo. Chapter 52. Hearing Minato's offer, Kazuo's lips curled upwards slightly more than his usual soft smile. I'm afraid that I would hold you down. My best trait is my strategies, not my raw power, Minato-senpai, Kazuo said as he shook his head lightly. Don't worry, you would be a great addition to the team. Obito practically screamed as he looked at Kazuo. If you really think so, then it would be my pleasure to join a team like yours. It's like a dream coming true, Kazuo said, his eyes shining as he looked at Minato. Right, yeah, you would be a great addition. Welcome to the team, Kazuo, Minato replied with a slightly awkward smile on his lips. Yeah! Obito screamed as he practically jumped next to Kazuo to ask him questions about his time on the battlefield. Kazuo explained everything from when he had first been reborn in this world all the way up to his last battle. When will I get a better chance to boast in front of the Hokage? Kazuo thought to himself, feeling the urge to chuckle as he looked at Obito. How the hell did Madara turn this dumbass into the legendary ninja of the Fourth World War? Seems like Madara's talents were even more impressive as a sensei and trainer than as a shinobi. Kazuo thought to himself before turning toward Minato. So when is the mission? Kazuo asked, his smile barely noticeable as his aura changed from carefree to one of seriousness. Minato and Kakashi immediately noticed the change whilst Rin and Obito seemed completely oblivious. Tomorrow actually, meet up with us in front of the village gates. I can't tell you more than that before the mission officially starts. Minato answered as he looked at Kazuo. Alright senpai, I'll have to get going now then. I have some matters to take care of in the village before I join you tomorrow. Do I go and register myself with you in the shinobi office as well? Kazuo asked as he stood up. Minato nodded as he stood up as well, politely sending Kazuo off. After heading out of Yakiniku-Q, Kazuo headed straight toward the Hokage Tower. Inside most of the shinobi-related offices were. The office that Kazuo was currently heading to was the Personnel and Operations Shinobi Office. It was also the office with the most influence from the Hokage, who could almost be said to personally manage it. Once inside of the Hokage Tower, Kazuo took a left turn, and after climbing up a pair of stairs and arriving on the second floor, he took another right and finally arrived at the office. Hello, I'm here to tell that I'm part of Minato Namake's team for his next mission, Kazuo said as he looked at a middle-aged man behind the counter. Minato Namake's team? We will have to confirm it, please wait a moment, the man said before heading behind a door to his back. After around 3 minutes, he returned. The Hokage has called you, he's waiting for you right now, the man said as he pointed to a pair of stairs to the left. Nodding his head, Kazuo started walking toward the stairs. I knew that it wouldn't be so easy. If I'm correct, then the mission Team 7 will be doing is the Kanabi Bridge 1, which could be said to be the most important mission in the entire village right now, Kazuo thought as he headed up the stairs and followed the path he had used in a previous turn to arrive before the door of the Hokage office. Knock knock. Come in, a voice said from the other side of the door. Opening the door, Kazuo headed inside, after which he closed the door gently and walked to the middle of the office. In front of him was the Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, also known as the God of Shinobi. I don't need to lie this time, so hopefully this will turn out better than the last time we met, Hiruzen Kazuo thought before he kneeled down on one knee. Only got up once Hiruzen told him to. Kazuo, you're joining Minato's team? Hiruzen said, in comparison to the cold authoritative voice that Kazuo had heard in his previous turn. This Hiruzen spoke with a soft, almost grandfatherly voice as he looked at Kazuo. Yes sir, Minato offered me to join his team for the next mission, so I accepted. Since I had no current mission at the time, I would only be coming back out of vacation tomorrow, Kazuo replied, his voice as respectful and polite as he could make it. I see, well then you can join his team, Hiruzen said with a smile as his eyes scanned over Kazuo's body. He's looking to see if I'm lying? Could there be a technique for that? If there is, then the possibility that he knows it is extremely high. He was named the professor for a reason, Kazuo thought before he gave the man a bow. I see, well then I'll get going, Hokage-sama, if you excuse me. One moment Kazuo, I've heard of your contributions in the last battle and I wanted to reward you. It's good that we get to finally meet like this, Hiruzen said, a soft grandfatherly smile still on his face. You're too fucking weak, Slate, you fucking bastard, Kazuo thought to himself as he looked at the man. However, his outward appearance remained the same, if not growing softer and slightly showing his joy. I'll give you a B-rank jutsu. You can go check them out at the ninja library and choose one. Simply use this when you plan to take one of them out, Hiruzen said as he quickly took a piece of paper and a brush to the side before inscribing some type of seal on it and raising it toward Kazuo. Taking the paper carefully, Kazuo bowed once more before he was dismissed. Next location, the ninja library, Kazuo thought with a wide grin once he was outside of the library. Still, he dared not say or utter anything even in his mind. The Hokage Tower was filled with hidden umbu. A single wrong move or expression could land him back inside the Hokage office, and he wouldn't be rewarded for a second time. Unless I was a masochist, Kazuo thought to himself jokingly. Chapter 53. A few minutes later, Kazuo arrived in front of a building near the Hokage Tower. It was a large building with multiple stories, built from wood that had been painted red. Heading inside, Kazuo found himself surrounded by hundreds of books and scrolls. To the left, there was a small counter, behind which an old lady was sitting and reading a book. Heading toward her, Kazuo gave a shallow bow of his head before speaking. "Hello, I've been allowed by the Hokage to pick a B-rank jutsu from the library. Where do I go?" Kazuo questioned, his tone polite as he faced the old woman. Lifting her head from her book, she merely nodded and pointed toward a staircase at the end of the room that led to the second floor. "Thank you," Kazuo said before heading toward the staircase. Once on the second floor of the building, he saw a similar layout to the first, however this time there were no books, only scrolls, and to the right, there was a similar counter as before, however the one seated behind it was a young man wearing a Chunin vest. "Hello, I was sent by Lord Hokage to pick a B-rank jutsu," Kazuo said to the man before showing him the small seal that the Hokage had given him. "Head to the next floor, the staircase is at the end of the room to the left," the man said as he pointed in the staircase's direction. Nodding his head, Kazuo headed to the next floor once more. This time, however, once he arrived at the third floor, 3 shinobi were already waiting at the top of the staircase. "Here's the seal Lord Hokage gave me so that I can pick a B-rank jutsu," Kazuo said as he showed the shinobi the seal. Looking at the seal closely and using a few hand seals, the shinobi nodded their head and allowed Kazuo through. Looking around, Kazuo saw that the quantity of the scrolls had lowered massively. The room looked barren in comparison to the previous floors. Heading toward the counter, behind which a shinobi was seated, most likely a Jonin. Quickly telling him what he was there for, the man said to look around and bring the scroll he wanted back to him. Nodding his head, Kazuo finally turned around and started looking through the jutsu section. He already knew what he would be picking, however. The shadow clone jutsu, Kazuo thought as his smile grew larger and larger. As well as every other jutsu in this place. Kazuo thought, his lips curling even further. Looking around, he found tens of B-rank jutsu, be they elemental or simply normal chakra-based jutsu. Ranging from jutsu like Fire Style, Great Annihilation Jutsu, Demonic Illusion, Tree Binding Death, Earth Release, Earth Spear, Water Release, Water Gun, and finally, the Shadow Clone Technique. Each of the scroll techniques gave a brief description of the jutsu, however they didn't tell the person how to do the jutsu. Taking the Shadow Clone Jutsu, Kazuo turned around and headed to the counter once more. Giving the man both the scroll and the Hokage's seal, he was given a different purple-colored scroll in return. Opening it quickly, Kazuo found the Shadow Clone technique inside, this time explained in full detail. "Thank you," Kazuo said as he gave a shallow bow to the man. "It's nothing, remember to destroy the scroll after you are done with it," the man said before quickly shooing Kazuo away. "No problem, goodbye," Kazuo said before turning around and heading toward the exit of the building. Once outside, Kazuo quickly used the body flicker technique to head toward Training Ground 1. Once he was back in his training spot once more, Kazuo opened the scroll and started reading it. The technique works by dividing the user's chakra in half and making a clone that is physical as well as can transfer back memories to the user. Because of the usage of so much chakra, it is considered one of the more dangerous B-rank jutsu. Kazuo read before quickly arriving at the part where it described how to use the technique. Seems fairly simple. It uses the tiger seal instead of the cross seal that Naruto uses for the multi-shadow clone technique. Kazuo thought as he memorized the entire scroll and finally decided to put the technique into practice. Making the tiger seal, Kazuo followed the instructions on how to move the chakra through his chakra coils and perform the technique. With a large puff of smoke, a clone appeared next to him. It looked completely identical. A success, Kazuo thought before sensing his chakra reserves. Extremely low. If I had Gennin chakra, then I would have most definitely lost consciousness or maybe even died if I used this technique, Kazuo thought before shaking his head and dismissing the clone. Around 60% of the chakra used was returned to him once more. The higher the mastery of the technique, the less chakra is lost. However, even then this technique is useless for combat for me of right now. I lose too much chakra and can't use any other techniques after I use it. Kazuo thought in slight annoyance before his mouth curled up into a smile once more. Alright, shall we check out the other techniques now? Kazuo thought as he sent almost his entire chakra reserves into his brain. Thump! Opening his eyes the next second, Kazuo found himself back in his broken bed, the time having looped back. Getting up from his bed, Kazuo followed his actions that he had done yesterday almost completely, the only difference being that he started practicing the shadow clone technique as well. Met with Minato later and joined his team, and then headed to the Hokage Tower before being granted the ninjutsu reward and arriving at the 3rd floor of the ninja library again. Alright, what should I pick next? Kazuo thought with a large smile on his face, his eyes practically sparkling as he looked at the ninjutsu scrolls around him. Chapter 54. After scouring each jutsu in the building, Kazuo quickly came to a realization that not all of the techniques could be used by him even if he knew it, and even then not all of the ones he could actually try and learn would be useful for him. An example would be the summoning amplification jutsu. It allows me to grant my summoned creatures special abilities. However, the method of use is described as extremely hard to perform and the amount of chakra needed is extreme as well. That's the main reason why the jutsu was lowered to the B rank. It's practically unusable unless you have Uzumaki or Senju blood. Kazuo thought before putting the scroll back. He had already grabbed the scroll once and killed himself after finding its conditions of use. The next class was the jutsus, which were practically useless for him. There's a lot of fire-style attacks, however they aren't that useful. They're simply variations of the normal fireball. While they are more unpredictable, they aren't that useful, and even then I still don't know if I have an affinity for fire release yet. Still, I'll memorize at least this. Kazuo thought as his hand landed on a specific fire-style jutsu. Fire release, Great Fire Annihilation. The jutsu's power increases the more chakra the user pours into it. Someone like Madara was able to turn it into an S-rank fire jutsu during the 4th Great Ninja War. It's what I would call a jutsu that evolves with the user. Kazuo thought as he grabbed the jutsu and checked out at the counter before heading to Training Ground 1 and memorizing it completely. Once again after that he killed himself and repeated the day, arriving at the 3rd floor of the building. Water style is something that I should have an affinity for. Me learning and even improving the water style, water bullet technique is proof. Kazuo thought as he scoured all the water release jutsu, landing on 2 water style techniques. Water release, exploding water colliding wave. Water release, water formation wall. The first was a method of attacking in a wide range with water, similar to the fire release, great annihilation technique, whilst the second was a better version of the jutsu, water release, water wall, simply for the fact that the user could hypercharge it with chakra and increase its durability and range. With this, it'll have a single target and wide target water style jutsu as well as a defensive water style jutsu. Kazuo thought as he spent the next 3 turns completely memorizing the jutsus. In this process the shadow clone had been a large boon for saving time. Next up is earth style, wind style, and lightning style. Kazuo thought before quickly spending the next turns memorizing the following jutsu. Earth release, iron skin. Earth release, sandwich technique. Wind release, pressure damage. Lightning release, lightning great ball. Lightning release, shock release. Wind style has the lowest amount of jutsu when compared to the other techniques. I'm guessing the reason is because of the low quantity of wind style users in Konoha. Kazuo thought as he finally finished memorizing the last of the jutsu he had picked. Sigh. Killing himself one more time, Kazuo went back and picked the shadow clone technique once more and burned it after reading it once inside Training Ground 1. This way, I'll be able to use shadow clones without fearing that they might think something went wrong. Kazuo thought as he finally headed back inside his house. Tomorrow would be the start of his next mission, a mission that might even be harder than surviving in the hellish landscape that had been the previous battlefield he had been in. Madara will be messing with the team, specifically to kill Obito so that he can take him under his wing. As long as I don't interfere with that in any way, then my survival chances are much better. Kazuo thought as he lay down onto his bed. Suddenly, as he was about to close his eyes, Kazuo heard a notification-like sound inside his mind. Ding! A mission has been generated. Survive the Kanabi Bridge mission. Reward, Bloodline Awakening 0.9%, 1 minor stat upgrade. Looking at the holographic panel that had appeared in front of him, Kazuo felt as if a whole ton of bricks had crashed on top of his head. This is basically confirming to me that I'll be dying a fuck ton in the next mission, isn't it? Kazuo thought in annoyance before sighing and closing his eyes once more. Hours passed and soon enough Kazuo's eyes snapped back open once more. It's time that I head off, Kazuo thought to himself inwardly as he quickly got up from his bed, went to his kitchen and ate a quick hearty meal for the last time in what would most likely be a while, and then geared himself up. The sun had yet to rise completely when Kazuo opened the door of his apartment and used the body flicker technique to arrive at the front gates of the Hidden Leaf Village. The time was 5 in the morning, and the time Minato had told him to be at the gates was 6. However, Kazuo would rather be early and wait for the others so that he could build a better reputation in their eyes rather than be late like a well-known Uchiha. Minutes passed as Kazuo stood with his back against a wall near the gates, waiting for the team to arrive. In the distance he saw the first member arriving. It was a young kid with spiked gray hair wearing a mask that covered half of his face and a short sword on his back. Kakashi Hatake, the future 6th Hokage, a man with many nicknames, Sharingan Kakashi, Kakashi the Copy Ninja as well as Kakashi the King Killer. Kazuo thought as he stared at the young kid who had yet to earn any of those nicknames. That didn't mean that he was weak, not at all. This young Kakashi could be said to be the most talented young ninja that had ever appeared in this time and age. It would become uncertain once Itachi entered the picture. However, even then, Kakashi Hatake had been the youngest Chunin and Jonin that the Leaf had ever produced. Chapter 55, Kakashi walked to Kazuo and nodded his head in greeting. Kazuo returned his greeting with a shallow bow of his own and a soft smile. Minutes later, Noara-rin also showed up, greeting both Kakashi and Kazuo with a large smile. After which, as soon as the time for the mission arrived, Minato Namikaze appeared instantly. "Hello everyone," Minato said, giving a light wave and showing a smiling expression. "Obito still isn't here, sensei," Rin said as she shook her head whilst showing an uncomfortable expression, her gaze turning to Kazuo sometimes. "She's uncomfortable because Obito is showing a bad image in front of me?" Kazuo thought as he felt the urge to laugh. Sure, the current Obito is a useless bastard, but he's still more useful than anyone here besides Minato. Kazuo thought as he remembered the boy's motto. He's the perfect sacrificial meat shield there is, right after Naruto. Kazuo thought as his lips curled upward. It was at this moment that they heard someone running toward them. Turning his head toward the village, Kazuo saw that it was Obito. He was still wearing his jacket as he ran toward them. It was clear that they had overslept and had to run all the way to the gate. Why isn't he using the body flicker? Kazuo thought as he looked at the boy strangely. "I'm sorry that I'm late. I couldn't sleep last night because of the excitement and then I overslept this morning," Obito immediately said as soon as he arrived, as he gave a bow toward Minato and then even gave an apologetic look to Kazuo. Does he see me as some renowned shinobi? Kazuo thought as his mind whirred into action. I can use that. Kazuo thought a moment later, but his thoughts were interrupted by Minato asking the group to gather around him. Place your hand on me, I'll be teleporting us there. This is an important mission and we have no time to waste, Minato said, and everyone immediately followed his words, putting their hands on his back and arms. Minato simply made a hand sign and in an instant, the group disappeared from the leaf gates. FSH. Hundreds of miles away in a small clearing with forests surrounding them, the group appeared once more. We're here, this is close to the border with Iwagakure, Minato said as he turned to face the group. I have other matters to attend to, so this will be the first mission that you will fully lead, Jonin Kakashi, Minato said as he smiled at Kakashi. At his words, Obito's and Rin's eyes widened as they turned to look at the white-haired kid. He had actually become a Jonin, an elite in the entire village, and all of that at the age of 12. You bastard Kakashi, just wait, I'll become the Hokage soon and surpass you. Obito practically screamed as he pointed at Kakashi with his index finger and made a pose. This is really weird to see in real life. Kazuo thought as he looked at the eccentric kid. Sigh. Don't scream, Obito. Either way, Kakashi, as I said, you will be the leader of this mission. I suggest you listen to any advice Kazuo has, however, as he is known to be a good strategist, Minato said as he pointed at Kazuo. Kakashi nodded his head, his expression serious as he looked at his sensei. Am known for being a good strategist? Kazuo thought before his lips, which were in a flat line, curled up once more. Seems like my reputation has spread even further. Alright, sensei, what's the mission? Kakashi asked immediately after. Minato simply gave him a white scroll as well as one of his three-pronged kunai. Inside are the mission details. If you face any danger that you can't overcome, then throw the kunai, and I'll be there in an instant to help you out, Minato said as he nodded his head and gave his goodbyes before disappearing from the clearing. Kazuo turned to Kakashi and motioned for him to read the scroll with his head. Kakashi nodded before starting to read the mission out loud. We will be attacking the Kanabi Bridge. This is a crucial bridge in this war, and Wagakure uses it to connect with Kusagakure as their relief point. By destroying this bridge, we are effectively shutting down one of their resupply zones. The mission must be carried out at all costs. Kakashi said as his already serious eyes turned sharp, his conviction almost being released in an aura around him. The Kanabi Bridge is a really useful passage for the IWA ninjas. I can see why this mission was so important and why we couldn't be told the details until we actually started the mission. It's best that we don't delay. Kazuo immediately agreed as he nodded his head at Kakashi, who replied in kind. Immediately after the group started their march toward the Kanabi Bridge, it would take them around 1.5 days to arrive there. Hours passed like this before they experienced an attack. It was sudden. One moment the group was running and the very next, Noara-rin was knocked unconscious and taken away by an invisible foe, whilst Kakashi's left eye was sliced by an invisible blade. It's already started, Kazuo thought as he observed the series of events. He made no move to run toward the kidnapper and save Rin. It wasn't good to interfere in Madara's plans. At most he would make sure that he himself remained safe and untouched. Alright then, Obito, let's see that Sharingan of yours. Kazuo thought as he saw Kakashi clutch his bleeding eye. Obito was looking at the scene with a shocked expression on his face before looking around himself. Kazuo himself had already taken out 2 kunai and had gotten into a combat stance. Be careful, the enemy is invisible. He has the advantage, however. As soon as one of us gets attacked, then both of the others will jump into attack as well. For now, simply maintain a defensive stance, Kazuo said as he kept looking around himself whilst he walked backward until he was next to Obito and Kakashi, who had yet to regain his form. Chapter 56. Obito and Kazuo kept looking around as they tried to find any signs of the shinobi, however they couldn't discern where the invisible enemy was at all. If I wanted to win this myself, then I would simply memorize his attack pattern as he attacked me. Even if I did die, then I could simply repeat it and then preemptively counterattack when he thinks that I don't know where he is. Kazuo thought as his eyes swerved left and right. Finally, merely a moment later, Kazuo saw Obito swing his kunai and blood drip from it. He had hit the enemy. Did he? Kazuo thought as he turned to look at him, and surely enough Obito's eyes had turned blood red with 2 black tomos swirling around a black pupil. So this is the start of your meteoric rise in power, Obito. Kazuo thought as he saw the kid clutching the kunai tightly whilst the enemy dropped onto the floor. Kazuo didn't hesitate. Immediately he appeared next to Obito and launched 2 kunai, one piercing the enemy's heart whilst the other pierced his brain. Obito turned to look at him. In a battlefield, you have to always make sure that the enemy is truly dead. You never know when you might get attacked in the back by a shinobi that you thought was already dead, Kazuo said before turning around to face Kakashi. Obito, your eyes. Kakashi thought as he straightened himself, still holding his bleeding eye socket with one hand. My eyes? Obito asked, confused, before Kazuo pressed 2 fingers against his wrist guards and summoned a mirror and showed it to Obito. I unlock my Sharingan, Obito said, his voice both sounding excited and showing his disbelief. Merely a second later, however, the excited expression disappeared from Obito's face. We have to go and save Rin as quickly as possible. Obito practically screamed as he looked at Kakashi. "We can't, Obito, we must complete the mission," Kakashi said as his eyes furrowed. To Kazuo, it was clear as day that Kakashi himself felt unsure about his decision. "What do you mean we have to do the mission? Rin takes priority over something like that," Obito said as fury took over his expression. "No, it does not, Obito. Shinobi who abandon their mission are scum. We cannot abandon our mission," Kakashi said, his tone growing graver as he ordered Obito to abandon Rin and continue the mission. Kazuo remained silent before a thought passed through his head. "Isn't this the perfect moment?" Kazuo thought before turning toward Kakashi. "How about this, Kakashi? I'll complete the mission on my own whilst you two head off and save Rin before joining me. Just make sure to be quick with it." Kazuo's words made Obito and Kakashi turn their attention toward him. "After all," Kazuo said as his lips curled upwards, his facial muscles contorting to show a sorrowful expression. "Those who abandon the mission are scum, but those who abandon their teammates are even worse than scum," Kazuo said, his words resonating in both Kakashi's and Obito's ears. "This..." Obito felt almost on the verge of tears from relief as he looked at Kazuo, who was supporting him. "We don't have time, Kakashi. Give me the mission scroll and go," Kazuo said as he extended his hand toward the white-haired kid. After a moment where Kakashi looked to be deliberating something, he finally gave up and took a scroll out of his ninja bag and handed it to Kazuo. "Go, I'll meet you guys and Rin later, don't be late," Kazuo said before using the body flicker jutsu and disappearing. His speed far surpasses what he had shown during the run with Team 7. Looking at him disappear almost instantly, Obito felt his eyes widen. It seems like he was holding back quite a lot. That's a relief. "Let's go now, Obito," Kakashi said as his eyes sharpened. Merely a moment later, the two started hopping from tree to tree as they followed the kidnapper's tracks. One used his Sharingan to see any changes in the environment whilst the other summoned a dog and used both his and the summoning's sense of smell to track the target. Hundreds of meters away from the two, Kazuo continued to use the body flicker as he flashed through the forest at immense speeds. He had conserved his chakra until now when he decided to use his full reserves to arrive at the mission location as quickly as possible. Perfect time to both further ingrain me in Obito's and Kakashi's memory as well as to hog all of the mission rewards myself, Kazuo thought as he imagined his name spreading even further in the ninja world. Body flicker after body flicker, Kazuo felt his chakra slowly but surely draining before it reached a point where he had to take out one of his soldier pills. "I only have one more after this. I'll have to conserve my chakra for now. The mission location isn't that far either way," Kazuo thought as he opened the map. "I should be able to arrive in less than 20 minutes at the pace that I'm going at. After that, I'll have to unseal all of the explosion tags inside the mission scroll and place them in strategic spots before blowing the entire bridge up," Kazuo thought as he put the map inside of his wrist guards and continued. 19 minutes later, Kazuo finally arrived at his destination. Further ahead he could see the large bridge that would be able to hold tons of supplies for a Hokage. Time to get to work, Kazuo thought as he quickly made a hand seal and burrowed himself underground before starting to head in the bridge's direction. Arriving at the first leg of the bridge, Kazuo appeared above ground and finally unlocked the explosion tags. Immediately a large amount of tags appeared before him which he quickly sealed back into his wrist guards before taking out only 100 and getting to work. "Why does it feel that since I've come to this world, I've become someone Deidara would be proud of?" Chapter 57, Kazuo continued placing explosion tags on strategic locations under the bridge whilst still trying his utmost to maintain his stealth so that he wouldn't be detected by anyone nearby. He placed each explosion tag in spots where they wouldn't be noticed even if someone was trying to look for any changes. This should be good enough, Kazuo thought as he nodded with a smile on his face before quickly using the hiding like a mole technique and heading away. After around 200 meters, he finally headed back above ground. In his hand, he held a long piece of paper that he had created using part of the concept of the paper shuriken jutsu. During that training, I tried to gain more insight into the jutsu, but I only managed to get a breakthrough once I read through all those jutsu from the library, and even then I'm still far from being able to make different paper jutsu. Kazuo thought before making a hand sign with one hand whilst holding the paper string. Kai. Kazuo thought as channeled his chakra to the paper string and through it, he sent it directly to the explosion tags. And he waited. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. 4 seconds. Nothing, no explosion. What? Kazuo thought as his guard immediately went up and he started looking around. Either the paper tore or someone stopped it. Kazuo thought before heading toward the bridge once more. Arriving there in one body flicker, Kazuo finally saw the reason. Countless shinobi were before him, hundreds of them, as well as a long line of supply carriages, could be seen at the back. Oh, Kazuo thought as he stood out in the open. The enemy had already seen him. Looking around, he quickly found the reason as to why the explosions had failed. Whenever he used the hiding like a mole technique, a small amount of chakra would be left behind in the earth. However, to discern it, one would have to be an extremely proficient earth-style user. And the enemy was a Wagakure, a village known for their earth release. They used something to reinforce the ground or something similar, expecting people to be hiding underneath and for them to be crushed. While they were wrong in their assumption, they still managed to foil my plan. Kazuo thought as he stared at the large quantity of shinobi who were facing him. Look, it's a tree hugger. One of them screamed as he pointed at Kazuo. Be on your guard, he could be bait. Someone else said, and soon enough the entire shinobi force was looking at Kazuo warily. A single shinobi appearing in front of a whole army either meant that he was bait or that the shinobi was a Kage. Of course, those were the two options. If the enemy was sane of mind, he could just as well be an insane bastard who didn't think at all. You're not coming? Kazuo asked, his voice amplified by his chakra which he had used to reinforce his vocal cords. It was a pretty simple technique if one knew what to enhance. Well then, I'll come to you, Kazuo said before he made a single hand sign. Poof! With a release of smoke, an identical clone of Kazuo appeared next to him. The clone instantly began running toward the shinobi whilst Kazuo himself immediately used the body flicker jutsu. This left the enemies slightly confused before one of them pointed out. He's just an insane bastard, kill him. We just sensed and there are no enemies in a 10-kilometer radius. Kazuo's shadow clone continued running until he arrived at the middle of the bridge where he gave the enemy a large smile whilst making a single hand seal. It was the tiger seal. Bye! Kai. Merely a split second later, the ground shook as loud thunderous explosions occurred at each of the bridge's supports. Instantly the bridge started crashing down whilst the shadow clone popped out of existence. Kazuo, already 2 kilometers away, heard the sound clearly and a large smile sprouted on his face. Still, this doesn't mean that I'm out of danger, they will most certainly be following me. Kazuo thought as he checked on his chakra reserves. They were almost entirely empty. Taking out his last soldier pill and popping it into his mouth, Kazuo continued his run through the forest. Thankfully, elite shinobi were much more proficient in traversing through forests when compared to other villages, so he had the advantage of speed. Will my reserves hold out? Kazuo thought as he continued heading to the location he had told Kakashi and Obito that they would meet up at. I can't just leave them either. Kakashi plays a major role in saving this world later on, he's useful, I can't let him die. Kazuo thought as he started pushing himself further and further. His speed continued to increase, however, an after effect of it was that his vision blurred even more than before. He couldn't discern anything around him or in front of him whilst using the body flicker anymore. Finally, after around half an hour, just when Kazuo's reserves were about to bottom out once again, Kazuo arrived at the location. Swish! Appearing in the middle of the small hidden clearing, Kazuo saw 2 people in front of him. Both of their eyes were red and they looked like they had gone through an immense struggle. Kakashi, you managed to save Rin, Kazuo said before turning his head left and right. Where's Obito? We have to get going and quickly, do you have any soldier pills? Kazuo asked, his voice sounded hurried. Kakashi simply took out a pill from his ninja bag and threw it at Kazuo, who took it and popped it into his mouth. Obito's dead, Rin said with a small voice. I see, I'm sorry but we have to get going right now, Kazuo said. His urgent response seemed to finally get Kakashi's attention as he turned to look at Kazuo seriously. His left eye still looked rather ravaged but clearly better than when he had last seen him. "A force of around 1,000 Iwabikure shinobi is after me right now," Kazuo said as if he were talking about his morning breakfast. Kakashi's and Rin's eyes widened as they looked at him. At that moment, Kazuo felt an immense pain spurt in his right chest. Looking down, Kazuo saw a large rock piercing through his body. It had gone into his back and appeared on the other side, completely piercing him. Aw fuck. Chapter 58, Waking up back at the Kanabi Bridge, just before he had started placing the explosion tags, Kazuo stood silent. It had been a while since he had died such a painful death. Fuck, think about what I can do. Kazuo thought as his mind immediately went into action. Even though he had died less than a minute ago, he continued not looking back or contemplating his death. The enemy is less than 5 minutes away. I need to finish this as quickly as possible. The problem is that I don't know if I can escape them. Just go for now. Kazuo thought as he quickly headed under the bridge and placed explosion tags. Unlike last time, Kazuo focused his efforts on placing tags only at locations with the highest probability of caving the bridge when destroyed. As soon as he was done, merely 2.5 minutes later, Kazuo went above ground and created a shadow clone before quickly popping a soldier pill in his mouth. Immediately afterward, he started running at his highest speed toward the pre-selected location where he would meet with Team 7. The shadow clone meanwhile walked to the middle of the bridge and immediately launched the explosion tags, causing the collapse of the Kanabi Bridge. After which the clone got dispelled and a small amount of chakra returned to Kazuo. It wasn't much, however it was better than nothing. The soldier pill had already started doing its job and now his regeneration of chakra would be quicker than his expenditure, at least for the next minute or so. Body flicker after body flicker, Kazuo finally arrived at the small clearing in the woods. It had taken around 27 minutes when compared to the 30 of the last turn, simply because he knew the terrain better. Looking into the clearing, Kazuo saw both Rin and Kakashi. Rin was using the mystical palm technique to heal Kakashi further whilst he sat on the ground silent. FSH. With the sound of the wind, Kazuo appeared in the clearing. Get up now. We have to run, an entire army of Iwabikure ninjas is following me. Kazuo said as he quickly took Kakashi by the shoulders and lifted him up. His words immediately put Kakashi and Rin on their guard. Alright, did you finish the mission? Kakashi asked as his eyes narrowed. Yes, the Kanabi Bridge is broken, Kazuo said immediately before asking for a soldier pill, which he was given a split second later and popped into his mouth. Do you have Minato-senpai's kunai? Kazuo asked as he swirled around and dodged to the right. A large earth spear of sorts was now at the location where he had been. Even with this speed, they still caught up to me. Kazuo thought as he looked at tens of ninjas appear on the other side of the clearing and completely surround them. Rin looked to be on the verge of tears as fear took hold of her. Sigh. Releasing a sigh, Kazuo placed 2 of his fingers on his wrist and a split second later, he was holding a kunai in each hand. Get a hold of yourself, this isn't a battle we can survive if we let fear take hold of our minds, Kazuo said, his voice extremely calm when compared to the situation the 3 of them were in. Kakashi nodded and immediately took out a 3-pronged kunai and plunged it into the ground. It will take a while before Minato-sensei arrives, Kakashi said as he took out the short sword from his back. It was a weapon given to him by the White Fawn of Konoha, Sakumo Hatake. I don't think we can survive this. Rin mumbled as she looked around at the shinobi forces that were only getting bigger and bigger. It was at this moment that Kazuo heard a notification-like sound in his mind. Ding! A mission has been generated. Time trial. Survive the Iwabikure forces for 3 minutes. Reward, 1% bloodline activation, 1 random hidden A-rank jutsu. As if I give a fuck about that right now. Kazuo thought as he looked at the now hundreds of shinobi around him. Survive 3 minutes, Kazuo said before he started walking toward the enemy shinobi. Can you use the shadow clone Kakashi? Yes. How many? 3 at most, and I'd have almost reduced my chakra to 0 by then, Kakashi replied as he continued surveying the surroundings. At that moment, a voice was heard. If it isn't the geniuses of Konoha, the son of the White Fang, Kakashi Hatake, and the monstrous genius who faced the Raikage and didn't die. Kazuo of the Leaf. One Iwagakure shinobi said as he walked into the clearing. It was obvious by the air around him alone that this guy wasn't your run-of-the-mill cannon fodder. And you are? Kazuo asked, his voice still as calm as ever. It's surprising, being able to remain this calm in a situation like this. My name is Kuro, an elite Jonin of the Great Stone Village. The man, now known to be Kuro, said as he raised his head high. The ego and pride could almost be felt as it oozed off of him. The Great IWA? I don't think I've ever seen anyone call the stone that before. Kazuo said as a chuckle escaped from his lips. Immediately the whole shinobi forces turned their attention toward him. You see, people say that there are 5 great villages in this world, Kazuo said as he came closer to the man. Now he was less than 5 feet away. Looking at the man in the eyes, Kazuo practically spat out his next words. Konoha is the only village that deserves to be called great. If we hadn't created the village system, you stone monkeys would still be tearing each other apart in endless war to this day. Kazuo said as he gave the man a large smile. Chapter 59, 1.5 minutes left, Kazuo thought as he stared at the enraged faces of the Iwagakure ninjas. How the fuck do I get more time? Kazuo thought before immediately raising his hands in the air. I give up. Kazuo practically shouted as he looked at the shinobi in front of him. At his words, silence emerged in the surroundings as the Iwagakure shinobi looked at him, their faces befuddled. You give up? The head Iwagakure ninja that Kazuo had been talking to asked, his voice showing his confusion. Immediately after, the rage came back. This time it was even fiercer than before. 50 seconds. Kazuo thought as he looked at the man. Of course, I give up. Do you expect me to fight 1,000 shinobi on my own? Kazuo asked as he looked at the ninjas as if he was a dumbass. Kakashi and Rin, who were behind him, were looking at the situation with a completely bewildered look. Is this what Minato-sensei meant? Kakashi wondered as he thought of the time they needed to make. If it was him, then he would have gone into combat immediately and hoped that he would somehow survive until Minato-sensei came back. Do you actually think that we will spare you tree fuckers after what you said and did? The man shouted as he looked at Kazuo, saliva dripping out of his mouth from the force he was using to shout. The man was beyond enraged at Kazuo, and it was apparent. I mean, I haven't killed even one of you guys? Kazuo asked, his voice lowering as if he was a small child. Kill this son of a bitch. The head ninja shouted, and immediately the shinobi ran toward Kazuo. However, contrary to what he thought, he was swarmed by 100 of them. There were 4 shinobi coming toward each of them. 4 attacking Kazuo, 4 attacking Kakashi, and 4 attacking Rin. It makes sense if more of them were to jump in, then they would simply hinder each other. Kazuo thought before quickly making a hand seal with one hand. Looking at him doing so, the head Iwagakure ninja's eyes widened imperceptibly. Damn Konoha geniuses, you will die here, there will be no time for you to flourish. At his words, a large smile appeared on Kazuo's face. It immediately caused the 4 ninjas heading toward him at immense speeds to stop and take a few steps back in fear of an unknown attack. Who says that I haven't flourished yet? Kazuo said as he immediately used the body flicker jutsu and headed toward the weakest point of the barrier that the Iwagakure ninjas had created around them with their own bodies. Stop the bastard. 30 seconds. Kazuo thought as he watched the shinobi in front of him make hand signs quickly. What jutsu is that? Kazuo thought before he saw the ground in front of him spike up and impale him through the middle. Cough. Blood dripped out of Kazuo's mouth once more as he looked at the enemy with bloodshot eyes. I will live, Kazuo said before his conscience left him. Once more he appeared back where he had been at. Following the actions of his previous turn, with a single difference in his speed in doing them, Kazuo arrived in front of Kakashi. Give me the kunai Minato gave you, now. Kazuo said, his voice clearly urgent, causing Kakashi to not dawdle and hand it over to him. Using a sliver of chakra that he sent into the seal at the kunai's handle, Kazuo threw it into the ground. Turning around to face the two, Kazuo immediately ordered. 1,000 enemy ninja are coming here. We have to hold out for 2 minutes and 55 seconds from now. Don't say anything and let me do the talking. Be ready for combat, Kazuo said before turning around to face the woods once more. 2 kunai had already appeared in his hands. And Iwagakure didn't disappoint as they soon appeared. Emitting what he had done the previous turn, Kazuo arrived back at the point where he was running to the edge of the encirclement. The enemy before him was already making hand signs. 10 seconds left, Kazuo thought as he looked at the enemy finish the hand signs. Just before the earth below him could rise up into a spike and impale him, Kazuo jumped up high using the body flicker jutsu as a way to increase his speed. He had arrived at around 50 meters in the air. When I fall down, my legs will break. Kazuo thought, however, he didn't even think of the injuries for a split second longer. In his arms, 100 explosion tags had appeared. It's now or never, Kazuo thought as he bunched every single tag together, their sticky underside working well to hold the tags together as he made a large around 30 cm in diameter ball of explosion tags. Take this, you fuckers. Kazuo thought as he continued falling down. He was almost at the bottom now, merely 10 meters above the ground. Dropping the ball, Kazuo brought his fist back quickly and used almost his entire chakra reserves to enhance his arm. This would cause immense damage to his nerves, however Kazuo didn't mind in the least. Bang! Punching the ball, he sent it directly into the enemy lines. The tags had already started sizzling when the chakra around his fist had hit them. Asterisk boom. Asterisk. With a loud explosion sound, the ground shook as hundreds of charred limbs flew into the air. The smell of burnt flesh immediately permeated the surroundings. It was at this moment as Kazuo was about to fall onto the ground, as he closed his eyes for a brief moment, hoping to lower the pain somehow, that he heard a notification-like sound in his mind. Ding! The pain didn't come. He didn't feel his legs get crushed on the ground below him. Opening his eyes quickly, Kazuo saw devastation. User has completed 2 missions. Chapter 60. Snapping his eyes open, Kazuo saw himself standing more than 100 meters away from his previous location. All around him hundreds of shinobi lay on the ground whilst a yellow flash continued moving through the battlefield. Looking to his left, Kazuo found Kakashi and Rin looking at the scene with wide eyes as well. They had known what their sensei was capable of, they had heard of his nickname and reputation. However, this was on a completely different level. 1,000 shinobi, dead just like that. Kazuo thought as he saw the light dissipating from an Iwagakure shinobi in front of him. Tearing his eyes away from the man's hateful gaze, Kazuo inwardly thought. Missions. And a holographic screen that only he could see appeared in front of his sight immediately after. Missions. Survive the Kanabi Bridge mission. Reward, Bloodline Awakening 0.9%, 1 minor stat upgrade. Claim. Time trial. Survive the Iwagakure forces for 3 minutes. Reward, 1% bloodline activation, 1 random hidden A-rank jutsu. Claim. Without waiting for a second longer, Kazuo quickly claimed both of the rewards. Claimed. Claimed. User's bloodline has been activated by 1.9%, total activation of 2% reached. Though it said that his bloodline had been activated even further, Kazuo noticed no changes besides his chakra increasing minutely. It was such a small increase that it was inconsequential. Immediately afterward, Kazuo opened his status menu. He had already thought of the stats that he would be increasing. Stats. Name, Kazuo. Age, 13. Race, human. Strength, C. Endurance, C. Agility, C. Intelligence, B. Charisma, B. Chakra, C. 1 minor grade upgrade available. Immediately, Kazuo pressed on the intelligence stat. Intelligence stat has been upgraded. Intelligence, B. Jack didn't notice any changes in his perception of the world or his thoughts, unlike the big change that he had noticed as soon as charisma had been upgraded. It wasn't that big of an increase, however. With this, I will be in Jonin levels of intelligence if I take it as D being Gennin rank, C being Chunin, B being Jonin, A being elite Jonin, and S being Kage levels. Kazuo thought. It was at this moment that he noticed the change that had transpired with this upgrade. My thoughts are occurring at much higher speeds. It hasn't even been 5 seconds on the outside world. Kazuo thought as he continued standing still, simply watching the carnage that the hero was causing on the Iwagakure ninjas. After a while, Kazuo saw Minato appear in front of the three of them instantly. 2 minutes and 57 seconds, that's all it took him to defeat the entire Iwagakure forces. Kazuo thought as he gazed at the man before him, the man who appeared harmless on the outside, who always showed a smile as he walked through the streets of the Hidden Leaf Village. Even more dangerous than Danzo. Kazuo thought to himself as he heard Minato ask, "Where's Obito?" Rin didn't speak, her eyes merely clouded as tears finally streamed down her face. "He sacrificed himself to save me," Kakashi said, his voice sounding cold and detached from the world itself. "I see," Minato said, his gaze showing his sorrow. However, he quickly hid it. Now wasn't the time nor place to think about such matters. "Is the mission finished?" Minato questioned. Kakashi merely nodded toward Kazuo. "The mission is completed. I destroyed the Kanabi Bridge. That was the reason why the Iwagakure forces were after me," Kazuo replied as he looked at Minato. "Good." Minato nodded before turning toward the three again. "I'll be taking everyone back to the village now. Place your hand on me," Minato said. "Won't that take a lot of chakra, senpai? Aren't you needed elsewhere on the battlefield?" Kazuo questioned. Minato turned toward him and shook his head. "What happened here needs to be reported to the Hokage. This will give me a day or so of vacation as well, which should be enough for my chakra reserves to recover," Minato replied. Nodding his head, Kazuo walked to the man and grabbed his shoulder. Similarly, Kakashi and Rin followed suit, placing their hands on either his shoulder or his back. A moment later, the four of them disappeared, leaving behind a field filled with blood and corpses, as well as a three-pronged kunai that was falling to the ground as it spun in the air. Thump! FSHH. Immediately after, hundreds of kilometers away, inside the Hidden Leaf Village, right in front of the Hokage Tower, 4 people appeared. "We have to go report to the Hokage immediately. Since this matter is urgent, we will be doing a vocal report instead of a written one," Minato said as he walked inside the large Hokage Tower. Following him inside, Kakashi and Rin looked miserable. It didn't look like they would be recovering anytime soon. "He sacrificed himself for you and you're just going to waste that shit?" Kazuo wondered to himself as he looked at the two depressed youths. "I would have jumped in joy if someone did that for me. I might just be the crazy one though," Kazuo thought to himself as he headed up the stairs toward the Hokage office. After a few moments, the 4 of them were told that they could head. Opening the large wooden door, Minato, Kakashi, Rin, and Kazuo found themselves face to face with 2 men. Sarutobi Hiruzen Oswell as the Hokage advisor. The roots of the Hidden Leaf Village. The darkness. Mr. Uchiha Hater. Hokage advisor, Shimura Danzo. That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in part 4. Peace.